We are in Acts chapter 19, and before getting into the scenario that unfolds in that chapter, I'd like to give you an illustration. Have you ever invested in something or even someone? Let's think about investing in something. I think a lot of you have invested through your life. You want to hopefully get a return. It's like, putting in money in that investment, right? Over time. You put a little bit in. Sometimes you can put a little bit more in. And you're putting it in because you really trust the investment, aren't you? You're expecting it to do well. And sometimes you just get all in. Have you ever been all in on an investment? Hold right here. All in on an investment, only to find out suddenly, gosh, the bottom drops out and it's all down here now. So all of that you invested, has this ever happened to you? It happened to me a little over 20 years ago. So Dawn and I were living in Germany, and we had a hospitality house there called the Heidelberg Hospitality House. Germany, Haus, that's why we were called the House. And while we were there, we had a lot of students that were involved, and sometimes we had 50 people in the house for dinner and for worship. And one of them, very sharp, he did some of our music for us. He had graduated from the Air Force Academy, really sharp guy, had been a fighter jet pilot, and then he was assigned over there. So he was very much a part of our ministry. And he got involved with a company that was just beginning to emerge. And it hadn't gone public yet, so it was looking for investors, and he had become a big investor. And he talked to me about it. Well, my investments were really, in the market and various companies that, I had heard about, that I knew about, that I guess trusted because they had been around for so long. So I really was not much of an investor on my own, but he talked it up big and he had put in a bunch of money. And so I decided I'd put in a little and then I put in a little bit more. The company was called Latch Tool. And it was this tool, a device like pliers, but the way it worked, it multiplied the power. So if you didn't have to put too much pressure, it would really create a great force and be able to do much more with just a little bit of exertion on the part of the user. Looked good, sounded good. I had all kinds of documentation. I put $6,000 in. That's a lot more money then than it is now. I use the word I because Dawn was not encouraging me to do this. She wasn't necessarily discouraging me. She was just trusting me. And I was trusting the company. And it didn't prove to be an untrustworthy company that extorted all the money. It just proved to be a company that never got off the ground. And when it didn't get off the ground, all my money got underground. It was gone. The best that I got out of it was writing it off on my taxes. Have you ever invested in something or someone and you lost it all? Has anybody ever had that experience? Or is it just me? It could be in someone too. You invested a lot into somebody and it just ended up being, oh, I see Craig is going, yeah, that's happened before. Has anybody ever had a similar experience like I've just described? Anybody? Yeah, Mark? And Clement.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, now the hands are going up. Mark, what happened?
Well, mine was investment in family business.
Mhm.
And I resigned my position in the Army and to go and help out with the company business and basically got stabbed in the back after I accomplished all the missions. So it's like a betrayal. It's we almost lost everything. with that experience. So uh, our house is for sale, and we're in the middle of a move, and we had to reverse all our actions and start anew. So that's multiple multiple pains. So yeah, but
Okay.
we prayed about it and recovered. But
So, Mark, what was one lesson that you learned?
well, I hate to say, it, but can't always trust family.
Okay. You can't always trust family.
You
Yeah.
know, should be
Okay.
able to, but
All right. Clement, you raise your hand. What
Yeah,
happened?
I raised my hand. It's a young man who dropped out of school. He failed to take some of his courses, and the family were tired of him, and they had to let him go. And we decided to take him in, made investment into his life, looking of ways of making him have it right. But last week, while I was away, this young man decided to pack his things and leave the house. Having done away with some of the young people that are staying in the same room, he collected 200,000 naira from one of the students and left with it. As I'm talking now, he has blocked his phone numbers. I cannot call and get to him and all that. So I understand with what you say. I identify with you when you make an investment into a life, thinking that yes, it will work, and it does not work. Now the lesson I learned is the from the parable of the sower, how that the sower went out to sow. Some of the seeds fell by the wayside, some fell by the rock, some fell by the thorns, and some fell on the fertile ground.
Yeah,
So I considered this as one of those that fell by the rocky side.
sure, sure. So it's always the risk we take, isn't it? Esau, how about you? One more. Esau?
Yes, I remember some time back, me and Ethel, we thought of starting carpentry. So we engaged two carpenters. We bought all the tools that were needed. We had invested the money in to start buying the materials we needed, and the thing started off. And we could see these things they were making, and they told us we have sold them, but we have been told to get the money on such a day. And when we were waiting for that money, the money did not come. So when we asked these guys, without knowing, they had already collected the money and they had used it. And that is how
Yeah,
this whole project failed. So
yes,
it was really a big loss.
yeah,
So one thing that I learned is before engaging into any project, I think it's important to find out the reality of it and the people you are dealing with, how genuine they are.
yeah.
I think it's important.
Excellent, excellent. What I'm hearing from all of these stories is they have one thing in common, that's trust. It's all built on trust, isn't it? And if you can't trust someone or an organization or a company or whatever, then it's going to affect whether or not you trust somebody again. Now, for me, and by the way, I think the intents are all good, but there's a motive behind it. I want to go back to mine. What was my motive? Well, my motive was to make money. And I didn't. And what did I learn from it? I've never invested in another small business since. Now, is that the answer necessarily? I just haven't. I just figure I don't want to take the chance, but I have invested. So, what's all this built on? And this is where we're going to be going with the story. For me, I wanted to make a return. I wanted to invest in a private company in order to make a profit. It's called capitalism, isn't it? If you're from America, you're pretty familiar with capitalism, aren't you? Yeah, we are. Yeah. So capitalism is, it's when industry and trade is controlled by private owners for profit. Now, there's nothing really wrong with that, is there? Well, maybe there can be, but I want you to think that this is very entrenched in who we are as the United States of America and other countries as well that have that capitalistic, economy, which is really born out of a democracy. So if you're living in a democracy or a wannabe democracy, then capitalism is going to come into the picture. But I want us to call into question why? Why? And how did that impact, or was it even impacted by my Christian faith? By my Christian faith. Tom, is Christianity capitalist?
I think there are aspects that may be, but in general, I don't think so.
Yeah. John, what do you think? John Holt. You're on mute, still there.
Uh, I'm thinking you said you learned uh, never again to invest in a small business, and what's amazing is just look at this screen, what you've invested in this house church Christian business. You've just given everything, Bart. So to me that's just a curious observation. I think it's the other point to answer your question is that it's very difficult to take a economic concept like capitalism and apply it in a spiritual context, uh, um, uh, such as religious matters or religious faith.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
least I would think so. I think it would be imprudent to say that Christianity is of any particular economic unequivocally any economic system.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Bart,
you. Thank you, Jan. Yes, Lynn.
I would just say, going back to your example, that you weren't just looking to make a profit, you were looking to make an outsized profit because you thought that the opportunity was going to give you a chance to make more than what you would have made if you had just invested it like you invested the rest of your money.
Yeah.
So you have to be wary of that with going into a venture like a small, business.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so let's nuance this a little bit. And John, I think you said it well when you said, well, hey, you invested into DI and look what's happened. Well, let's think of it this way. What is the reason we are investing? Is our motive to enrich ourselves, or is our motive to enrich ourselves? If you think I'm saying the same thing, I'm not. I'm using one in the singular and one in the plural. Did I want to invest in that company to enrich myself? Yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, I did. Is there anything wrong with that? I don't know, but I don't think that's the best reason. I don't think that's what God would have me do. But if the motive is to enrich ourselves, what would that be? Oh, that would be the company. What if I was thinking, wow, this tool could really revolutionize the way a homeowner can do work around the house? I really believe in that. I'm investing, and in return come back and it enriches the company. Yeah, and then I get shares that help me, but it helps the company, so it's a win-win. Same thing, I think, with DI. I'll tell you what, investing in DI, especially over the last few years, has enriched ourselves and me both. I think that's a really good thing. But I want us to consider this matter of just enriching ourselves. I want us to think about the impact of culture on our lives. Culture. I'm going to give you the definition that I want to use just for the purpose of this message right now on culture. I just want to say that culture is rooted Think about this. Culture is rooted in the particular beliefs of a society that shape the behaviors of that society. So culture is rooted in the particular beliefs of a society, of a group of people, what they believe, and those beliefs shape how they behave. So let's say America has really been shaped by a capitalistic view of, I want to have private property, I want this to grow, and I want it to benefit me. Oh, if it benefits others, that's fine. But it also breeds selfishness, doesn't it? It's kind of hard to control. And when your society is really bent on that, we're coming up after Thanksgiving into the Christmas season. So what do you want for Christmas? We're going to go out and buy, and all the marketing, and you've got to have this and you've got to have that. Do we really? How does that relate to the Christian culture? If a democratic society like America is built on a capitalistic, culture that shapes the way we behave, and our beliefs as, going back to the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, good, and endowed by their created with certain inalienable rights. What are the rights? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Folks, whose happiness? When you read that or you hear it, whose happiness are you thinking about right now? Whose happiness? Lynn, whose happiness?
I don't know. I pass. I wasn't listening. I'm sorry.
I think our own happiness, but it can also be a collective happiness for everyone.
Yes, it can be. Yes, it can be, and it should be, but if it often isn't. And really what I'm saying is I want us to look at how the culture impacts our lives. And I'm talking to a lot of folks from Africa, and you have a culture that is unique in certain ways. But I want us to think of the culture in which we live and how the beliefs of the society in which we are a part, and the religious background that comes from your own country and your own life and your experience, and how it affects your behaviors. And I want you to put it alongside the culture of Christ. What does that look like? We've been going through the book of Acts. What happens in the early church is the Spirit comes down upon them. And it says 3,000 were baptized in one day, and they were all devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching collectively, to the breaking of bread, to fellowship, to community. Everyone, it says, was feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place, and they were sharing things with each one as they had need. That sounds like socialism to me, folks. But it wasn't a socialism imposed on them. It was something that happened to them, and they began to just share their stuff together. Is that the way the church in America looks? In Africa looks? I don't know. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying let's look at it. How about the church in first century Ephesus? Let's go to Ephesus. We're going to have a reading. Dick, I know that you're just chomping at the bit to do the reading, but I'm going to set the stage on what was happening in the city. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the city, which is one of the great cities of the world at its time, like New York City, like London, or even more so. And Craig knows because we went there some 30 years ago, and the ruins are remarkable. And I'm going to show you some of those ruins in a little bit. So Paul comes there after having just visited briefly one other time. And last week we found out that, he meets a number of disciples, but they weren't really disciples. of Jesus in the fullest sense. The Spirit comes, they speak in tongues, a church is born, and what Paul does is what he always does. He goes into the synagogue and he begins to communicate the beliefs that he has been given. Remember, culture is rooted in the particular beliefs of a society that shapes the behaviors of a society. So he's coming in and he's bringing in some new beliefs, not dissimilar from the Jewish beliefs that were there, because that's where he is. He's in the synagogue. But there are some differences. And Jesus is at the center stage and he is the Messiah. Well, what happens there is what happens everywhere is there's a division within that community. And he's doing this for like 3 months. And as a result of that, he goes outside the synagogue. The synagogue is the place where all the learning is supposed to happen. It's the classroom. Like Clement over there, Bethany Christian Academy. You know, you got your buildings, you got your facilities, but you can't be there right now for certain reasons. Well, Paul couldn't either. So where are you going to go? Well, he found another place. It was called the Hall of Tyrannus. What that was most likely was Tyrannus may have been a philosopher who had a facility where he did his teaching. And when it was available, when he wasn't teaching, he rented out perhaps. That might have been the case, or maybe he was just the owner of the facility. Whatever the case may be, he began a school there. And it says the disciples came. And what's Paul doing? He's trying to establish the community, a church there. Do you think everybody's going to like that?
Very much.
Huh? Wait,
No.
No.
no, why not?
Well, I mean, they've already got their established churches or temples or whatever else. And I mean, I've never been to Ephesus, but it sounds like it just was a center of, knowledge and culture and religion. So I would say trying to start a new church in that environment, people wouldn't like it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So this is looking different than what is. And he's got a little group that's forming, and he's got this church, and he goes on for 2 years. Wow, that's a long time. By the way, I would love to see a Hall of Tyrannus set up in every one of the locations where we have ministries going on in Africa and Asia. It'd be great. You teach them the things that the God gives us in the gospel, not to overturn the government, but just to teach the truth. And you know what happens? People are listening. And what really enhances their interest and willingness to listen is God is doing amazing works through Paul. In fact, no place else in the scripture do I see where God doing through Paul more than here. So much so that people were even going to bring articles of clothing from Paul so that they could bring them to others to be healed. Many were healed, and the word gets out and breaks out all throughout Asia, it says. Asia, think of modern Turkey. Ephesus is way over on the western side, almost at the coast. And so it's expanding and it's growing. Is everybody happy about that? Who said no? Clement, did you say no? No. Yeah, but what I want you to see is Paul has just rented a place and he has a school going and people are coming and they're responding, and there's a work of God happening that is putting the words and the works together and going, wow, maybe this is true. And what's happening is it's changing lives. And changed lives result in changed behaviors. Now we run into an economic problem that is noticed by the leaders of Ephesus. So finally, Dick, here's the reading, okay? It's a long one, Dick. Go right ahead.
Acts 19:23 to 30. there arose no little disturbance concerning the way. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shines of Artemis, brought no little business to the craftsmen. These he gathered together with the workmen in similar trades and said, Men, you should know that from the business we have our wealth. And you see here that not only in Ephesus, but in almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that gods made with hands are not gods. And there is a danger not only that this trade of ours may continue into disrespect, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing, and that she may be deposed from her magnificence, she whom all Asia and the world worship. When they heard that this were engaged and were crying out, Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So the city was filled with the confusion, and they rushed together into the theater, dragging with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians, who were Paul's companion in travel. But when Paul wished to go in amongst the crowd, the disciples would not let him.
Thank you, Dick. That was a lot. Do you see what's happening? The economy is being really affected greatly. Why? Because this group is responding to the gospel. They're believing in certain things of the gospel, which are different than the things that are being believed in the city of Ephesus. Ephesus is where there is a coming together of economy and religion and worship of all kinds of practices to the great goddess Artemis. That's the Greek version. The Roman version is Diana. She is the goddess of childbearing. She is the goddess of nature. A lot of the goddesses were, recognized as the mother of life. In fact, she had multiple breasts on some of the statues that were there. This is a big deal. Just imagine if your culture is so rooted in this. And this was a capitalistic system to some extent right there. And they had a private economy going and they wanted, that to grow and to continue. Well, what did Ephesus really look like? What was it like? Like I said, Craig and I were there. Well, it was this massive place. This is some of the ruins. That tallest structure is the Library of Ephesus. It was the third largest in the world at its time. It was actually built after Paul was there, not long, but those are some of the ruins. There's only about 17% of the city that has been excavated, and so it's massive. It's huge. That's the amphitheater. I was in there with Craig, and Paul was down there at the very bottom. That amphitheater seats 25,000 people. And where you see in the background the land, that was all water because ships came in. It's now all been silted in. That's why the city was vacated centuries later. But it was a marvel to behold. The ships came in a place of commerce. And this is a facsimile of what it might have looked like with the boats coming in. And that's the temple then. That's all that remains. It was destroyed. That's probably something similar of what it looked like. The Temple of Artemis. It was the biggest temple of its kind, perhaps ever. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Football and soccer, we have stadiums that fill 100,000 people. That temple would not even fit into the ground where the football field is, and the end zones and the sides. It would just be a little bit bigger than that. It had 127 columns going around it, 60 feet high. Like I said, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, and she was their goddess. And when people stopped buying the shrines that were made by the business people, they got really upset about that. Was Paul there to wreck their economy?
No.
No, he wasn't. Paul was just there to preach the truth and let people behave in ways that are consistent with what they believe. That's what I want us to look at right now. What do we believe? What do you believe? Is your behavior consistent with that? What if you stopped purchasing certain things because it wasn't consistent with your belief? What if enough people in America or in your country stopped purchasing certain things because of that? How would that affect the economy? What if people didn't use credit cards? Scriptures say, owe nothing to anyone except to love your neighbor. Only owe them love. My wife and I never let our credit card that we use pay interest. We never pay interest on a credit card. We just use it and pay it off every time. What if everybody did that? The credit card companies, they exist off of credit paid by people who are paying extra for what they're buying that they can't afford now. I'm just saying this really affects the economy. So one lesson I want us to think about has to do with application. Look at your beliefs. Are they consistent with your behaviors? They should be. They should be. But there's a lot of people that say, I believe this, but I really behave this way. Well, Jesus had a word for that. And we have a word for it too. When we call ourselves or somebody else that, it's not an affirming word, hypocrite, right? So we want to be consistent there. Now there's something else, and I'm just going to play this out, how this turns out. The city's in a uproar. In fact, as it says in the text, so many people come together that there are folks that they don't even know what's going on. They're just there because the fire truck went down the street and they're running to follow it. Where's it going? I don't know, but let's go. So the stadium is full. And Paul is trying to get out there and say something, and they're not letting him because I'm sure they would have killed him on the spot. They almost kill a couple of his friends who want to speak, but the person happens to be Jewish. And when they hear that he's Jewish, now they really don't want to hear him speak. And they start to cry out in a mantra sort of a way, great is Artemis, great is Diana of the Ephesians. They do that for 2 hours. Wow. Finally, and this is really interesting, finally the town clerk gets up and says, hey, stop. This is not good. This is a riot is breaking out. The courts are in session, so you can take this matter to the court if you need to. But, and here's what he says, these men are not robbers. They haven't violated the temple. He even says they haven't even blasphemed the name of our goddess. So what you are doing is wrong. Now, if Paul had done that, trying to upset the whole thing directly and literally, I mean, it would come back to really be devastating. And that can happen to the church as well. But here's what I learned from this, and this is the second lesson that I want to leave you with. When we communicate Christ, we can do so in a positive or a negative way. Paul chose the positive way. What's the difference? The negative way would be to go in and tell people all that they are doing, what they believe, and how they're doing it and living it is all wrong. They're all messed up. Now, there are prophets that did that kind of stuff in the Old Testament, but they were doing that to the nation of Israel to get them back on track. Basically saying, you believe this, but now you're behaving this way, you need to go back. But Ephesus, this is the way they had conducted business for centuries. This was just entrenched. So he's not going to them and saying, hey, your goddess is all messed up, and the way you're doing economy is all this is all messed up. You need to come over here and listen to me. That would be the negative way. And I think it's like telling somebody that they ought to behave like a Christian before they even believe like a Christian. Not a good idea. So what does he do? He just speaks the truth in a little school over there on the side. It just so happens that the truth he speaks is embraced by many, and it just so happens that those many believe and they respond. And one of their responses is they don't buy these shrines anymore. The economy dries up. He didn't tell them not to, they just didn't. Well, maybe he did tell them, but it doesn't say that. It just says their economy dries up and they're in crisis now. Now, here's the result of when it happens that way. Over time, and we have some evidence of this over there in the ruins of Ephesus, we have evidence of carvings of angels. We have evidence of carvings that are Christian. This amazing city, cosmopolitan, one of the great wonders of the world, the ancient world there and all the wealth, it was transformed over time through the work of God, through the gospel communicated, believed, and then the culture changed. Over time, they didn't believe in a bunch of gods, and they don't over there. One God. How did that happen? That's how God works. What is he calling us to? Again, here's the application. Make sure that our beliefs are consistent with our behaviors. That the culture that we're really living is the culture of Christ first and foremost, and out of that comes our behaviors. And let those behaviors have an influence on the culture in which we live in a positive way. I think the gospel is really attractive. I think when it's presented, people want it. And when they want it, and other markets begin to dry up because they're not buying that, well, you know what happens? Those markets eventually change. And they start to cater to a new way of thinking, a new economy, one in which people are investing in companies that are doing really great and important and needful things. And then everybody gets benefited. I think it's a win-win situation all the way around. So let's consider, how the culture influences us, and whether it's the culture of Christ working in and through us that's making a difference in the world around us, beginning with our neighbor next door. As a reminder for all of this, the one who really, really gives us this new way of thinking and living, new way of believing and behaving, is Jesus. And it looks like this. Now tell me if this isn't revolutionary. I didn't come to be served, but to serve. I came to give my life as a ransom for many. Greater love has no one than this, than one lay down his life for his friends. That, folks, is what will change the world. That will develop a culture that is the culture of Christ, that has influenced us in so many ways, but there's much more to be done. So if Christ is in you and you are in Christ, let's join together. Let's remember, he's the one in which our lives should be rooted, our beliefs and behaviors. Let's join with Jesus in that upper room when he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, saying, "This is my body given for you. Take and eat. And as often as you do this, remember me," the body of Christ. In like manner, the Lord took the cup, and after giving thanks, he said, "This is my blood. It is of the new covenant, a new covenant, a new culture, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Take this, all of you, and drink it. And as often as you do so, remember me." The blood of our Lord. Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the community that you have developed here and are developing that is international. Thank you for giving us a faith that is not just in our heads, but in our hearts and works through our hands and feet, in behaviors that really will make this world the place that you created it to be in the first place, and make Nigeria what it needs to be. Lord, help us to be your hands and your feet through which you work this love that communicates what is right and just and good to the world at large, but really to the person next door, because that's the one we can touch most directly. In Jesus' name we pray. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. God bless you all. And happy Thanksgiving.
Happy